But having each other shoulder and having the faith throughout.
Are we suffering?
That's really helping us.
All right. Sorry.
Going.
Mommy, what does that say?
Let them be with your prophet in the garden. So after Adam, my wife and I got pregnant, and we were having the ultrasound done, and turned out that my wife was carrying conjoined twins. They were telling us, looks like they're sharing a heart, and we don't know if they may survive an hour. Or a day, or a week. They asked if we would mind if the chaplain stepped in and visited.
Patience is a virtue. I am so sorry. I have no idea why we're struggling with this. It's going to be grainy. Or maybe not.
And we were having the ultrasound.
Now what? Is there a better Wi-Fi? Jenny, can you check to see if there's a better Wi-Fi? Can we check to see if there's a better Wi-Fi? Could you ask them for one?
Done, and turned out that my wife was carrying conjoined twins. They were telling us, looks like they're sharing a heart, and we don't know if they may survive an hour or a day or a week. They asked if we would mind if the chaplain stepped in and visited with us. That was my exposure to what a chaplain was. My wife and I are, there's no way I think we're ever gonna be apart after this. It's just a brutal and beautiful experience.
at your grandpa's house.
He comes up to me and he says, son, back when I was your age, we ate in the house and went to the bathroom in the yard. Now we're eating in the yard and going to the bathroom in the house.
He gave me some antique money. This was used by the Confederate States, and this one was when the state...
I was the first generation of my family to go to an integrated school. I didn't have black friends growing up, African-American friends growing up, until I got in high school. And then interacting with different people and seeing that there's good and bad in all people. There's beautiful people that come in all different shades. Really, it was really confusing. Things didn't really add up. It caused a lot of friction in my family. I started getting into hip-hop music. Between classes, we were raising a ruckus in the hall, rapping and beatboxing and stuff. This is at a county fair, at the Neshoba County Fair in Philadelphia, Mississippi. I think we went on right after the ladies' ragtime band. It's pretty awesome. Really receptive crowd to the two white kids rapping. I started hearing Malcolm X mentioned in some of this music, so I read the autobiography of Malcolm X. Right after I became Muslim, I walked around Jackson, Mississippi in a robe and a turban. It wasn't out of love for the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, to try to emulate him. It was to piss my family off, to aggravate my family. And I think I did a pretty good job at that. You know?
Your past is what made you, and it influenced you, and it makes you the person you are today.
Yeah.
You have to embrace it, good or bad.
Yeah.
And then you go on from there.
Yeah. Let me go pop the hood. Recently, it kind of sunk in. I'm sitting at a crossroads of being from a Southern Baptist family from Mississippi that's a practicing Muslim. And something doesn't quite feel right about this. I mean, you can't function psychologically throwing away the first 29 years of your life because you become Muslim. And Islam doesn't ask that of you. Southern hospitality and Islamic generosity, they blend perfectly. The Andy Griffith Show, that's a good example of everything I aspire to be as a Muslim. Just look at the Andy Griffith Show. Like hard work and believing in God and honoring your family. And people that are rednecks, redneck doesn't mean something negative. That's a badge of honor. So I made a group called the Society of Islamic Rednecks. And I was thinking, how can I share Islam with people from my background? 1,600 people joined this group on Facebook. And it's just funny. We're working on the Islamic commentary to Leonard Skinner, Simple Man, and it's 61 people. But Halal Barbecue, 5,014. On the little blurb, it says, there's many positive parts of redneck culture, but we just seek to purify that of racism and sexism. I was very concerned about how people of color would respond to that, but the criticism I've got have been from white people. I still have mixed emotions about it.
Hey, Assalamu alaikum. How are you? Shane, nice to see you.
And so I've asked different people of color that are scholars what they think about that.
Good to see you too. Hey, Assalamu alaikum.
And it's an important conversation to have. This narrative of reconciling whiteness, trying to purge whiteness of some of the more pernicious parts, and being Muslim, is common across the spectrum of white folks, from Southern white folks to Northeastern white folks. You know, but see, the thing about being white, as I'm sure you know better than I do, anything you do that connotes even slightly some exclusivity is, you know.
Well, that's why I was thinking to transition from like the Islamic redneck to Southern hospitality.
Okay.
To open it up, like working on like Southern Hospitality Islamic Center.
I gotta take a picture of the shit. My wife's gonna love this.
Being white, you have the luxury, you can kind of pretend racism doesn't exist. But I think in our souls, we know something's not right, and we're not at ease.
So, our brother Shane is going to tell you something. He told me, he said, you know, Imam, I grew up as a redneck. He's in the African American Islamic Summit. That's deen. That's Islam.
It's impossible from where I sit to be raised in America and not be socialized to be a racist. Or white supremacy is socialized into you as a white person here. Allah made us this way, and if we participated in something that's unjust, we need to turn back to Allah, make tawbah, apologize, and then stand up for what's right. And what part of your culture do you keep, and what parts of your culture do you purify and you let go of, such as racism and sexism?
Most of my family are from North Carolina. Honestly, we hate to use these harsh words like hate and all this, but you're the guy that I hate. So to hear you say that, you know, to apologize, to validate things, it unlocks the door for us too to come out of a shell. You see your hand like this? Well, you gotta integrate it with mine like this. You know, if we get on the same side of the fight, yeah, I mean, divided will fall. Divided will fall.
We already have that issue of division to begin with, right? No offense, you know, but like, how would you get your people to let go? Because white supremacy or the system benefits you, right? Yeah. So then who's going to let go of that? Right? You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's my question that I want to explore. Yeah. Like, how do you do that? We can make a contribution to standing up for justice. Someone was asking me about this. Well, what would motivate white people to do that? Because you don't really have anything to gain. You're just going to give away your privilege, but I'm thinking you gain your humanity by doing that. You're true to your soul, that you don't brutalize other human beings. Malcolm X, there's a quote where he says that white people that want to work against this injustice, you can contribute to solving the problem by working together, but also go work with your community, your own community.
Hey guys.
Like even having to consider you having a quadruple bypass.
You know, our daughter wrote him a letter just listing all the things that she still needed him for, you know, to chase the boys away and teach her how to drive the truck on a real road instead of just little back roads. And
right. Can you totally purify that term redneck? I'm not sure, but it's interesting to have that conversation. And I think it definitely kind of sets the stage for people to understand you can keep your identity. You just have to let go of the things that transgress other people's rights. Yeah, because if you get bumped right. I'm trying. I'm a work in progress. I'm going to miss not getting to come see y'all. You know.
I like you. You've been around. You've been really good to us.
You have an open invitation to Roxborough.
Okay, cool.
Absolutely. Come see us. I appreciate all the thoughts and prayers.
Sorry about all the glitches, but that was our documentary. It was, I think, wonderful. Thank you. And what we're going to do is we're going to have some questions that I'm going to pose to the Imam for a few minutes and have you go with that. And then we're just going to open it up to open questions for anything you would like to ask. Is that okay with everyone? Is that a good thing? All right. So I'm going to turn around to face you and turn this off and ask if we can turn the lights on in this room again, if that's possible.
Yep.
Which one would you prefer?
Yes, this is fine.
Okay.
Thank you.
So while I was looking like a goober sitting here holding on to things, I was also doing some amazing feat, signing into my email account and getting stuff done. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and say, I'm not going to go with the questions that I have here. One of the questions I'm going to ask you is, you changed the name of the Islamic Center, or Islamic Society of Rednecks, to the Southern Hospitality. Now, what does that society do? What is it? What's the function?
Well, initially, the Facebook page, partially what I said, they spent about a week filming, and we filmed in New Jersey and North Carolina and California, and then they chopped it down to 16 minutes. So there's parts of the story that really doesn't get into, but so it mentions part of the reason I founded the Facebook page was to try to share Islam with people from my background, and that was kind of inspired by hearing Dr. Sherman Jackson, one of our brilliant American scholars, ask, who's sharing Islam with the white working class people? And then after a while I kind of realized, oh, I'm the person that could have those conversations because that's where I come from. So part of it was the desire to speak about Islam, not to try to convert people, but just to try to have conversations with people in a language that they could understand. And then as I got into it further along, I kind of realized part of this was helping me put myself back together, not compartmentalize my identity, that I have to take everything about who I was before I became Muslim and throw it away, that actually to be a full and healthy person, I need to honor the best parts of my past while practicing my faith and understanding that's what Islam actually invites us to do. So also trying to model that for people and give people a space to explore that. And that's really what I tried to do with the center, initially online, and then I realized it really doesn't matter if it's just a handful of people, if it's a dozen people that show up to family game night or whatever it is. But it's maybe it's of more value to focus on the people that are closely interacting with you and the people that you actually have the most, that you could have the most impact on. And that's a small group of people in North Carolina. So what I've done is tried to be flexible. Like we didn't have a physical space. We would meet at a coffee shop or someone's home and have a class or have social events. But what I've done recently, over the past year or so, is tried to fold this work back into the masjids. Maybe some of the masjids where there's not a lot of young people showing up. So I'm involved with 2 of the W.D. Muhammad masjids in the area. And for those who don't know, these are some of the Muslim communities that kind of evolved out of the Nation of Islam. So just the fact that I'm welcome into the leadership of these communities, especially coming from my background where my parents would never interact with people that didn't look like them. It's just just a proof of how merciful God is, as far as I'm concerned. It's not because I'm smart or anything like that. It's really because of how God is so merciful. So it's changed. It's constantly changing and evolving, but I'm really seeing the benefit in some of these masjids where there's not as many people attending, to try to bring some of that programming in and take advantage of these welcoming spaces and partner with people, because people are doing great work. How do we connect and work together? So,
I have two more questions that are my own, and then I'll get to some of these other ones. One is, and if it's too personal, let me know. How did your parents and siblings, if you have any aunts and uncles, react to you becoming a Muslim, and how do they feel about your new lifestyle?
well, again, like in the film, it talked about I wore a turban and a robe to kind of aggravate my parents. That's part of it. I mean, I wore a turban and a robe too because one of the people that I met before I became Muslim, he's a convert. His name is Imam Hyde, and he's in the Bay Area in California. He was a prison chaplain at San Quentin for many years. But meeting Imam Bilal and wanting to see somebody one of the first people that I met where I felt like, you can tell this person I feel like they practice what they preach. It seems like a really humble, genuine person. So part of it was wanting to emulate the outside and inside character of this person was part of that. But so I think maybe my parents initially had a bad reaction because I was trying to be in their face about it. And I think part of this is when you look at the people that do research about white people growing into like a non-racist white identity, the stages these scholars talk about is maybe some white folks, they're not aware that they're participating in being racist toward people or oppressing people. That it's not even on their radar. And as they start to become aware of the discrepancies and injustice, they can feel really guilty. And one way that people try to deal with that guilt is to deny that it's happening, or maybe they over-identify with the people that are being mistreated. So I think part of that was also trying to navigate this guilt. And I kind of mentioned in the film that within Islam we have an idea called tawbah. It's talking about returning. So it's always open for us, no matter what we've done, to recalibrate, to aim back toward the target, to if we realize we've been participating in something that was wrong, we don't have to carry that around with us for the rest of our life. We can vow not to return to that, and we can try to make amends with whoever that we've wronged, and then we can ask God to forgive us, and then we can move on from there because God created us. There's a wisdom behind God, why God put my soul in this body. But just like if you're wealthy, you need to navigate that responsibility in a beautiful way. I need to navigate being in this body, being in this part of society in a way that's responsible, not beat myself up about it.
Nice. Thank you. So, I'm sure you get this one a lot. Of all the religions in the world, what attracted you to Islam?
Yeah, I think for a lot of, especially maybe white converts, Islam would be the last religion you might look at, because I can remember being a small, like maybe this young man's age, a young child, and seeing like the hostage crisis from Iran on the news, and I don't think I had any positive impressions of Islam, but maybe I had kind of more of an existential crisis early on, where I was looking into different traditions really to be happy. Like, how are you happy? And I thought I was going to find the magic word where you could get everything that you want. And then you go deep enough in all these world traditions, they tell you it's caring about other people is how you're going to be happy. You come into terms with, basically within the Islamic framework, like you taming your ego. You get in your ego in check as how you're going to be happy, and that's what's going to liberate you. So I kept seeing all these traditions saying the same thing. But I think really the encounter with Imam Bilal Hyde, where I met a human being, where I got the impression from this person that they were actually practicing what they were preaching, was very powerful for me. That, oh, it's possible to do more than just talk about all this stuff. It's possible to use the free will that God has given you to not let your selfishness and your anger and your hate and your judgment dominate your life. You can, with God's grace, you can transcend some of these things. And I saw in Imam Bilal that was possible. And then I think also studying all these different religions, it looked like, from my understanding, from a more classical read of Islam, there's space to recognize that these different traditions came from God. These are earlier versions of Islam, if you will. If Islam is submitting your will to God's will, then it's not us against them. This is one continuous line of prophets and messengers that have been sent from God to guide humanity. So it seemed like it was inclusive as well.
Thank you. Thank you. How did you come to the attention of the filmmakers? How did they hear about you?
I don't remember exactly what happened, but it was through Facebook, of course, where Jennifer Taylor, who's one of the directors, and Mustafa Davis are friends on Facebook. And Jennifer said she saw me post something on one of Mustafa's photos or something on Facebook, because he's also a photographer, filmmaker, and one of the co-founders of Talif Collective, which is a Muslim organization in the Bay Area that serves youth and converts. So she kind of went down the rabbit hole of looking at my profile, and she just thought that was interesting because they wanted to maybe do a series of shorts on people, Muslims that were not what you would think, not what would come to mind when you thought of a Muslim, just to show that Muslims aren't a monolith, and just to show the variety of practice. So they said I should be like a location scout or something for film, because when they came down, I'd already said, well, maybe we could film this there and this there. So they said they got way more footage than they thought they would ever get coming for a few days. So then it went from maybe something that would be 5 or 10 minutes, part of a bigger series of shorts. It turned into its own thing. And then PBS picked it up for their online film festival. POV, Point of View, bought the film from them and included it in their online film festival as a little standalone piece of different shorts that was online. So,
one last question before we open it up. It's one thing for people to convert to a faith because it talks to them. It's a whole other thing to then continue to study it to the point where you're now an imam. How did you come to be an imam? What brought you there?
Well, I was telling your husband, I don't know how comfortable I am considering myself an imam, but a lot of this came from doing the chaplaincy work, and I had my eyes set on being a board certified chaplain. And part of that is you have to have an endorsement from a religious group. Part of the clinical pastoral education residency, you had to lead worship services as part of meeting your requirements. So I reached out to one of the local masjids where I knew all the imams had training as chaplains. They did CPE and these were W.D. Muhammad communities. Like I said, the community that kind of evolved out of the Nation of Islam into like Sunni Islam. So I knew that chaplaincy was something that was valued in that community. In some of the other Muslim communities, they really didn't understand what chaplaincy was. Maybe they thought it was proselytizing to people. They didn't really get that modern chaplaincy in a hospital especially. It's more like an interfaith. You're kind of helping people lean on their own resources. And there's a lot of behavioral science that's studied in the program. But they told me from the mosque, from the masjid, we're going to have you come start doing sermons, and we'll look at, after 6 months, we'll kind of see where we're at. And so after 6 months or so, they endorsed me as an associate imam in Raleigh. And so every fifth Friday, I'll do the sermon there. And then in their sister masjid, which is the oldest Muslim community in North Carolina, at Ar-Razak Islamic Center, now I do the third Fridays there. So it's just a testament to these pioneers that are open to start handing the banner. And that's one of the things that Oliver Muhammad, who mentored me in Raleigh, said that Imam W.D. Muhammad, who was Elijah Muhammad's son, he had said until the community and its leadership becomes very diverse, he wouldn't felt like he really achieved what he wanted to do. So for them, it was like the next step that, of course, this community should be more diverse, but still involve people who understand the culture of Muslims in this country and can speak to relevant issues and topics while being Muslim, but not throwing away our past. You know.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
So if anyone has any questions, let me know. I'll bring the microphone to you. None. Oh, okay. And he's like, surely you know.
Are there other Muslim communities in North Carolina? I know North Carolina is a very varied state, but do you work mostly with the ones that come out of the Nation of Islam, or do you have converts that? I'm just wondering about the general. How many Muslim communities are there in the state, and they must be diverse?
Right, not as many as there are here, but just in Durham, I don't know how many people are flocking to Durham right now. It's become like one of the foodie capitals of America, and there's hipsters everywhere. It's really changed a lot since I've been there. But there's like a variety of communities in Durham, and the community that I'm a part of, it did grow out of the Nation of Islam, but it's a diverse community too. All the leadership are American converts at both masjids, which is interesting. And but it's diverse. And then, like I say, I tried to fold the work I was doing with converts. Most of these are white folks too, the converts. I tried to fold that into going to these masjids, because these are one of the Ar-Razak and As-Salam. These masjids are some of the only places I've found where I've felt really welcomed. You can tell the people love you and they want you there and they want to include you. And maybe it's because we do come from a common background or common culture to a certain extent, that it's easier, there's less of a learning curve that you have to do about each other's culture. But I think part of it's just the heartfulness of the people too. Did that answer what you asked me at all? Okay.
Anyone else? I'm going to go there and then come to you.
I don't know if you answered this already, but were you a Christian originally? Kind of.
Yeah. You know, my grandmother was. Well, we're from a Southern Baptist family, so my grandmother was the one that went to church, and my going to church experience has mostly been through my grandmother. My parents, I would say, they're more kind of, maybe they call themselves Christian, but they're more like secular humanists, I think, like don't lie, steal, kill, but they never really went to church or talked about Jesus that much. But you were asking about the relationship with my family earlier too, but like my grandmother, a few years before she passed away, she said, I wish that your mother and your brother would become Muslims. Because I think she tried Christianity and it didn't stick, but she saw that that there had been some improvements in my character, I guess, trying to practice some religious tradition. So your family
wasn't against you being Muslim because you were going against something?
Yeah, because it's a really beautiful gift from my father that he told me, just growing up, like, listen to both sides. Like, when you're interested in something, listen to both sides of the argument, then go back, reflect on it yourself, and then make up your own mind. So what a beautiful gift. With countrified people, but still somehow within themselves saying, yeah, but this is helpful to navigate life this way. That's very rare, so. Yes, sir.
One of the things that clergy persons do in the hospital with patients is to pray with them.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
prayer says a lot, I think, about our views of God and how we see God relating to creation and to us. So I would be interested to know how you, as a Muslim, what prayers you offered with patients facing a variety of issues, and what that may say about your view of God in relationship to that patient.
Right. Yeah, that was quite an adventure about learning about different traditions, kind of being in the trenches, like, training to do hospital chaplaincy. You got about a week of orientation, and then they throw you in the deep end, and you do most of the work. You visit most of the patients, and I had all the cardiac units and GI units. So most of my patients were Christians and Jews and atheists. But one of my first encounters praying for a patient, I went in the room, and I'm wearing this hat, this kufi. I go in the room, and this older white gentleman and probably 20 family members, and he has a big wooden fish. Maybe it has Jesus carved in the middle of it, but he's obviously stressed out about going into surgery. And I say, I'm Shane from the chaplain's office. And he said, everyone be quiet. The pastor is here to pray. So then everyone gathers around in a circle and they're holding hands. And I'm glad that I used to do rap music, because I had to freestyle this prayer, it says, Dear Lord, please. So I think part of being in the CPE program, every night that you did a 24-hour shift, you had to lead everyone in prayer, and you saw a little bit of that. I was saying the opening chapter of the Quran in English, and all those pastors, they all had their head bowed. So being in an environment where people allow you to believe in your faith and still have the love to interact with each other and work together to care for people, I think really brought this out of me, that I was able to see some of my growing edges as far as, am I comfortable doing this for this person, or what is this supposed to sound like? So I think I would kind of pray in the language of the person. I found myself like, we don't normally hold hands and say, Dear Lord, but I felt comfortable doing that. And then further along into the program, I started incorporating some prayers from the Islamic tradition, and then my patients really responded very positive to that. But I kept it general as far as praying to God. But I think there was a lot of family dynamics kind of impeding me from offering that to people that I thought may push back in a negative way. But I'm studying with the Ignatians now, the Catholics, studying to be a spiritual director. So I'm the only Muslim. I'm around a dozen other clergy in this program too. So it's been very beneficial to learn this in the real world, how to navigate this. But it's situational. Every single person is different. I mean, as all the Muslims, I'm sure we all have our own individual way that we relate to God. The poet Rumi said there's a million ways to kneel down and kiss the ground. So honoring how that person is trying to connect and helping them remove the barriers within themselves that's keeping them from connecting is something that we were called to in chaplaincy. And hopefully I'll get to help people do that with being a spiritual director too.
So have you found in your chaplaincy when a person is on their deathbed, that they're not so much that they lose that secular humanistic thinking of being so picky about they want a Baptist, a white Baptist preacher man coming in, that they're open more towards anybody that has that connection to God, not specific on the faith, not specific on the color of their skin, that they're laying in bed every day, not knowing if they'll live tomorrow, laying on their bed looking up, wanting that direct connection to God. Have you seen that kind of washes away that I guess you would say even racism, if you want to say that, from that person? And they're not so picky about wanting a specific race or religion.
Sure, it seems the universal thing that's on people's mind when they're facing the fact that they will be passing away is, who do I need to forgive and who do I need to ask to forgive me? So helping people, because it's painful to talk about that you're going to pass away, and it's hard to bring up these conversations, but that's part of what the chaplain can do, is have these difficult conversations with people. And we don't want to see people suffer. It hurts for us to see someone suffer. So a lot of times we'll talk about the weather. We want to let the person know that we see them, you know. But definitely anyone in the hospital in general, it seemed like that broke down a lot of barriers for people. But I also think the people that go into CPE, they weed out people that want to proselytize and people that aren't already grounded, that don't already have a deep spiritual practice. They weed these people out. So I think part of it, when you go in the room, the people can pick up, they can smell it a mile away if you're not sincere, if you don't really care about them, beyond whatever labels, whatever this person is. They're your brother or sister in humanity, and people can tell if you're faking it and you don't really love them. So I think that caring, that love can bring down a lot of barriers if you have a chance to meet with someone one-on-one, because over and over, I would have white patients from rural North Carolina, and then we would talk a little bit, and they would ask if I was a rabbi. I said, no, I'm not. I'm a Muslim. And they were like, a Muslim? I never met a Muslim before, boy. Thanks for praying for my mama. You know, like, thank you so much. You know, so yeah, I think your intention for engaging in that encounter is very powerful. Yeah.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Assalamu alaikum, Imam. Thanks so much for being here. This is a huge blessing for us. Thank you for having us. You know, you said something that was in the video which struck such a chord with me, and you mentioned Dr. Jackson, who's one of my mentors, and I told him when I was studying the life of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and the people who were around him, this is one of the few debates I got in with him, and I actually held my ground against him. And so I wanted to see your thoughts on this. I said, when I studied the life of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and the people who he's around, the people who I most closely associate his people of Quraysh with is Southern Americans. And he said, no, yeah, maybe, explain that to me. I said, no, not really. I said, if you look at Southern hospitality, if you look at the nobility of the South, and if you know, when I moved here 10 years ago, I never thought I would, but I actually got into country music. And when you listen to country music, there's so much verbiage about the nobility of the South. When your barn burns down, we're back to build it up again, and how it's slipping away. You can feel it in country music, how it's kind of slipping away out of our hands with whatever, you know, with what the blue coastal folks are doing. And there, so many songs, Fly Over States and Jason Aldean and all these people talk about the nobility that's slipping away. And, you know, Dr. Jackson's like, I don't know about that. He kind of had a different perspective of it. And I said, I pushed back. I said, I really think in many ways, you know, they're the dominant culture in many ways still, white culture, and there's a lot of it's very easy to throw the baby out with the bathwater, you know what I mean, and be like, oh, there's racism, but there's still a lot of beauty and a lot of the nobility of the South, and so I kind of wanted you to just touch on that a little bit more, because you kind of you elaborate a little bit on it in your video, and I just would love to hear a little bit more about, you know, taking the best out of, every culture has a beauty in it, and taking the best out of that. So if you could just elaborate. I'll take that back to Dr. Jackson and then build our argument, you know.
I'm not arguing against Dr. Jackson, but I will not support you now. Yeah, I mean, it's a hadith, right, where I believe it's a hadith where the Prophet, peace be upon him, talks about the people that were best before Islam will be the best in Islam, right? Maybe it's having exposure, and I mean, again, like Southern white people they're not all the same, but at the class that I teach on Sundays, it's mostly older black men and myself and we talk about kind of the way things used to be in the South, and I think still, for most people, they maybe don't understand that for most white people, like even if they're racist, if a black person is broke down on the side of the road, they're going to stop and help you with your car. Or the white guy's still going to open the door for the black woman. They don't want you to marry they don't want their kids to get married to each other, but maybe part of it in the rural setting, people having to depend on each other and work together to survive, people from a certain socioeconomic class. Maybe that's part of it, but yeah, I think there's a lot of potential. Definitely, if you look at, manners and morals are very central to, I think, a healthy Islamic identity. A lot of Southern people, maybe that's why I kind of tried to tweak it from the redneck to Southern, because across the board, Southern people, we still do have some of that, yes, sir, yes, ma'am. Like people get upset with me doing that. And I said, that's just the way I was taught to do that. And I hold the door open for people into, like my grandmother, there were some old clothes, and she said, instead of getting rid of the clothes, we had to take them and donate them, because she said there's other people that don't have anything. So a lot of beautiful values. And God is merciful. Like, to think that God can't take some of these people that are racist and voted for Trump, that he can't change their heart in a second, you're underestimating the power of God, is part of it too. And I think I'm probably proof of that I came out of that. Like the film opens, it says, like, I think I'm the only person here whose grandfather taught them how to tie a noose. That was part of my inheritance from my family, So definitely there's a lot of morals and manners that if we could come to terms with the racism and sexism, there's a lot that Southern people, I think, have to offer. But yeah, that's the issue, isn't it? I mean, a lot of it has to probably do with poverty and self-worth and, whiteness. Just whiteness in general. It's a huge discussion and topic about how maybe, rich people have divided and conquered us by making us feel like we're so separate and fight against each other and take advantage of us. So it's a lot of work to be done, but yeah.
So you brought up the noose, and I'm sorry to do this. How did that make you feel when you were taught how to tie a noose? How did that make you feel? How old were you, and
I think I didn't think about this for a long time, and then I kind of realized, like, oh my gosh, that's messed up. That's really messed up. Like, for probably about 11 years old, but my grandfather didn't tell me what it was. He didn't tell me what to do with it, but he explained the mechanics of how it worked and all this stuff. But I didn't really understand the backstory at the time. But yeah, years later. So at the time, it was just. It didn't really mean I didn't have any context for what that meant. But later, looking back on it, as sweet as he was in certain ways, it's like, that's really messed up to do that. And then he also told me where the civil rights workers were buried in Philadelphia, Mississippi. Like he was saying, yeah, the FBI and the people came in and they thought they were over here, but everyone knew they were over here. So I don't understand. I think later I watched Eyes on the Prize on PBS when I was in my teens. And I think that started kind of opening me up, and listening to some of the early hip-hop music was very socially conscious and told, I think, the other side of American history we don't always get to hear about in textbooks. So it took a lot of years before I was able to kind of see that in context, and how, thank God that's nothing that's going to get past that stopped there, you know, within my family at least. But
anyone else? Oh, got some more.
Okay, we've been sort of talking about racism from white people. I'd like to know if you have experienced people saying, from the other side, black people saying they hate you because of your skin color. I mean, I feel like Americans have a tendency to talk about racism as being, you know, whites hating blacks, but in my experience, because I'm from a multiracial family, I've seen where blacks really hate whites too. And so I was wondering, in your experience being with Muslims and, you know, working with the Muslims from the Waraqti Muhammad groups, have you been able to experience black Americans, black Muslims, or not black Muslims in that sense, but Muslims who are dark skinned or black? I always called it black because my dad always said, I'm black, I'm not African American, so I use the term black. But have you had any experience in helping black people not be racist?
you know, I think when I was younger, and I realized, like, at some point I felt like either all of my family are crazy or I'm crazy. Either I'm crazy or they're all crazy. And then I realized they're all crazy. To just judge people by their skin color. But definitely in Mississippi, there's just, it's a vicious cycle. So I would, you know, probably at 15 or so, like, there was a family moved into our neighborhood and people sprayed racial slurs on their car and their driveway. So we were trying to scrub, I was out there with their kids trying to scrub this off their car and we were using MD 2020, if anyone knows what that is, for the paint stripper. Y'all know what Mad Dog 2020? Y'all should not know what that is. But so I would try to be overly nice to every black person, give everyone the benefit of the doubt. But definitely, there's a history to this. So maybe some people would feel a certain way about me because of the way I looked, and it's probably understandable to a certain extent. But you know, I think the people that I've interacted with, being Muslim, has helped given us a framework to process all this in. And I think that's when you asked earlier, why did Islam speak to me? I kind of forgot, because it gave me a way to make sense out of the nonsense I was experiencing. Like, why are you hating people because they look different and they're really nice? These particular people are really nice people. Why do you have a problem with them? So for Islam to have so much scripture that overtly says a white person's not better than a black person person's not better than a white person, it's the most pious person that's the best person, or that God made you into different nations and tribes so that you would have the opportunity to know one another and compete in goodness and doing goodness, you know. It really gave me a framework to try to navigate all this insanity. And I think probably also with the people that I interact with from the Imam Muhammad's community, because at some point I realized, like, how do you, I mean, you're a black man in your 70s or 80s, the things that you've experienced, and then when you see me, you hug me, and I can tell you really love me. How does someone get to that point? So it was making me realize, like, how many people have been made saints by the way they navigated the difficulties they had to bump up against in their life, you know. So it's so complicated. It's such a nuanced discussion, you know. Because I can also remember in elementary school, it was going around, you know, things go around in elementary school, the fun thing to do for that week or whatever. And so one week, everyone was calling each other boy, you know. And so I called a young black kid boy, and he responded differently than the white kids, you know. But I didn't understand the backstory to that. So I think a lot of this is maybe on both sides of the discussion, we don't know the history of what's going on. And maybe it's a challenge to make sense out of it. But in the film, the young man was telling me, he said, when I saw you before you spoke, you were the person that I hate. You represented everything I hate as a white person who's abused my family, who lived in North Carolina. But, you saying, just naming that these horrific things have happened and feeling some remorse on it and being committed to not let that happen on your watch, or at least within the small sphere around you that you have some influence on. He said he was saying in there, it's like it allows some of these walls to come down where we can start to maybe build some bridges. So, yeah.
Anyone else?
This is a CPE-related question, right?
Actually, it's just chaplaincy related.
Yeah.
One of the things that you said in your video was that there were times you were afraid to walk into the hospital room because they kick you out because you're a Muslim. Something kind of like that.
Yeah.
How did you overcome that fear? Because actually, as a Christian, I've been kicked out of rooms because we have a very large Hindu and Muslim and LDS community in our church, in our hospital.
Yeah. I think just being aware that, I think, I would sometimes be afraid to go engage with older white people specifically, older white men specifically. And then my supervisor kind of noticed that pattern emerging. So it just inviting me to maybe reflect on that and realizing, I think a lot of that has to do with my grandfather and coming from a background where you really didn't have the space to have your own opinion. So I think just being aware of it really helped, and just, okay, I feel this coming up in me, but I have to take this and sit it to the side so that I could try to be of service to this person, and getting really clear on the intention. I never had no one ever kicked me out of the room, and I think of it as no one ever refused letting me care for them. But I think, so that's part of it. But I've definitely had to be creative with how you navigate things. Like someone's child passed away when I was on call one night, and the baby was about to pass away, and they wanted to baptize the baby. So I can't baptize the baby, But I went and talked to them about this, and I made sure they had what they needed to baptize their baby. And offered maybe the father would do it, because they didn't get to touch this baby very much, interact with this baby very much. And so I checked back in with them, and they said, you're really nice, we really appreciate it, but we don't really know that we're comfortable with a Muslim baptizing our baby. And I said, no, that's not what we had a miscommunication, but so he baptized the baby. But I guess being flexible and being creative with how you navigate that too. And I think maybe being a white male, I probably had it easier, I think, so.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. And I hope everything goes well. For those of you who don't know, clinical pastoral education is very difficult. It's like you went through the Marine Corps or something, where it's if you know someone that survived doing clinical pastoral education in a hospital, I did like 1,200 hours of direct patient contact and 400 hours of education, and sometimes you're there 24 hours straight, dealing with people on the worst day of their life, over and over and over. Someone lost their child, someone's in the psych ward, thinks they're possessed, or just over and over and over exposing yourself to trauma. So, God bless your soul for doing that. That's hard work, but very life-giving, and you learn a lot about yourself through that work. And it's what a blessing to be in an arena where you can serve, because a lot of us have all these quotes about service. And there was a scholar in town one time when I was doing a 24-hour call, and my friends were there, and someone was talking to me, and they said, "Oh, you're really missing it." And I just visited a Muslim family who had lost their child, and usually Muslims will say, "Well, it's the will of God." and just try to, and I let that person express themselves, but at the very end, I reminded them, at the very end, I didn't try to cheer them up, but that the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, when he lost his child, he cried and he grieved. So giving people, but he didn't shake his fist and cuss God. So giving people the permission to grieve, giving people the permission to be a human being, I realized I'm not missing him. I'm exactly where I need to be, and it's such an amazing space to put some of this stuff that's in our books into practice that a lot of times we don't practice it. So a place to do it over and over and over, and I would stay in CPE. That's why I'm in spiritual direction. It's similar, the type of training. So I really loved that. Other than the on-calls, that kind of wears on you after a year. But bless you, and I hope you have tremendous success with that. Yeah.
I think I'm going to add a little bit to that, because as part of being an ISBA director, I serve on the CPE Professional Advisory Committee here at Banner Health. And as a member of that committee, I'm asked to come in to do the interviews. Now, to interview intern residents coming in, you get a giant packet in the mail. And this packet is literally their life inside and out. It's like 50, 60 pages of everything that is most dear and private to them. I remember the very first time I read one, it took me 3 times to keep coming back because I was getting embarrassed that I got to learn so much about a human being I know nothing about. And then when I went in for the interview, to sit there across from this person and know so much about how they feel and what they've been through, it was difficult for me. But I can't even imagine what it's like for them to open up and tell people. And what they explained to me was, if they can't open up and tell you about their innermost fears, what they've gone through, what right do they have going into a patient's room and asking to be welcomed and having them open up? So I thank all of you who work in CPE. That is just some incredible work, just like the Imam said. If anyone has any other questions, the Imam's going to be here for a while. Please, we're going to end our program here to help you go on your way, but he's here. He's happy to talk to you one-on-one, and we'll try and get him a bottle of water because I'm sure he's parched by now. But I'd like to thank all of you for attending today. It was an honor. I always tell people that we can put on all the best programs in the world. If we don't have anyone join us, there is no event. So because of you, we had an event. Again, you might have found an envelope on your chair. The Speakers Bureau is a nonprofit organization. Every little bit counts. If you can see your way to giving us a large sum of money, yes, we will take it. But if you think that the programs we put on are worth $10 a month, $20 a month, $7,000 a month, I don't know, whatever you feel. So please, think about us, do that. But you're welcome to, stay here for a little bit, chat with the Imam, and join us in our other programming. Thank you all very much for joining us. Good afternoon.